Welcome to the Noble Ape Podcast, Ape Reality. I'm Tom Barbalet, and this serves as the October 2007 Mailout. I have to apologise for my voice and general cognitive condition. I'm a bit under the weather as I record this podcast. There are three pieces of news. The first, in no particular order, is that Apple released Leopard, and part of the Leopard release related to changes that needed to go into the Noble Ape source code. Somewhat ironically, this actually came to me this morning as I realised that all the changes that I'd put in for the recent Chud releases were required for Leopard as well. I think it's only required for the 64-bit version, however it would be nice to make the Noble Ape Simulation 64-bit compliant. It's quite a substantial set of changes. I have already implemented it for the Chud implementation as I mentioned, however it's going to change certain aspects of the look and feel of the Noble Ape Simulation for 10.5. I don't necessarily think it'll affect the standard releases, but it's changes that'll need to go in nonetheless. It will initially require a command line file input, so for both the scripting and the file handling that will have to be done through a command line. I believe that there's some way one can wrap this through Cocoa. I'll need to investigate that in the short term. However, this does come together with the current structural changes that are going through in terms of the event atomization, and in some regard this will make this process a bit easier to parameterize. However, it does require quite a bit of additional code changes as well. My primary concern is that I'm taking the week of Thanksgiving off in November. However, I'm not sure whether this will allow me enough time to do the code changes that I require, plus write the first chapter of the new book project. And I have received some additional correspondence from James Murata, but all this correspondence seems to indicate that the necessity for me to write this first chapter and proposal is greater than I originally anticipated. I had a biota chat over the last week with Bruce Damer. We discussed a number of topics relating to space and other areas of interest of his. However, towards the very end of the conversation, we veered towards what the next book project will be about, although the next book project isn't a direct criticism of any group or any individual. It is, in fact, a stark description of the metaphysics that can come from artificial life development. I think it's a necessary work in a contemporary setting to identify the applied nature of artificial life development. As I've characterised in a prior podcast, I have started the event atomization work with the Noble Ape Simulation. This is in fact simplifying the code to some regard, however there are still lingering questions about how ApeScript will fit in, whether ApeScript should become default. I think all this will be decided in the November week off time frame, and I'm looking forward to reporting directly from that period of time in podcast format for those that will be listening. In any case, a relatively short mail out, somewhat prefaced on my current cognitive condition, but also just on the direction of the work that has been done this month. As I noted in the last mail out, the source code development that I'm working on currently limits the number of podcasts that I put out. However, I think in the long term, limiting podcasts and maximising source code development is probably good at this current stage, as I hope the listeners to this podcast will agree with. If you want to get in contact, tom@nobleape.com. I love receiving correspondence. I'm particularly interested in hearing from new folk that haven't corresponded with me previously. However, the folk that correspond with me frequently are always welcome to email me as well. Thank you very much for tuning into this podcast. Look forward to tuning into the next podcast.